Watch this vidcast, or I'll gouge your eyes out.
Welcome back, Horror Hounds, to Ghostman and Rivera's Horror Show podcast.
I'm Mike Ghostman Pickle.
And I'm James Rivera. We have some interesting movies to discuss today, but before we get to that, we got to get to...
Horror Show News.
The first story is HBO Max is teaming with J.J. Abrams for the Shining prequel series Overlook Hotel.
The sequel to the Netflix original movie, The Babysitter, is dropping on September 10th.
The makers of the popular horror board game Mixtape Massacre are hosting a virtual game night in September called Mixtape Madness.
A Terrifier limited edition comic book series is going to be released.
And finally, Eli Roth's History of Horror picked up for a second season on AMC. All right, we got HBO Max dipping into the horror genre again with J.J. Abrams for a Shining prequel series called Overlook Hotel. It was originally supposed to be a movie called The Overlook, but that project was scrapped when Dr. Sleep was a box office failure. I have no idea why. Mm-hmm. But it's part of a huge deal that J.J. Abrams signed with Warner Media to produce 3 drama series for HBO Max. And for the Overlook Hotel, the narrative approach is supposed to be similar to Bates Motel, and it will feature iconic characters as well as untold stories of the Overlook.
I'm not against it, but I'm not particularly excited for it. I like the direction that Mike Flanagan took the story in with Dr. Sleep. And if anything, I would have liked to have seen Mike Flanagan continue that universe and tell more stories about it, not J.J. Abrams. Nothing against J.J. Abrams, but he's not really a horror person to me.
Yeah.
And I also think this is kind of a mistake. It seems that they're scrapping Flanagan's ideas in favor of Abrams because Dr. Sleep wasn't a success, financial success. My only thing with that is that it wasn't a financial success, but that's not because of Mike Flanagan. It's just because people were not interested in seeing a sequel to that, and it wasn't as advertised as well as it could have. Let's be honest. They could have had a much better marketing campaign for it. So if that's the case, I don't see why a J.J. Abrams take on the Shining mythology is going to be any more successful than a Mike Flanagan one. And I don't think the studios are taking that into consideration, that it might actually be the story and not the filmmaker that's the problem.
I'll watch anything to do with The Shining. I'll give it a chance, of course.
Because it's The Shining.
And I'll pretty much watch anything J.J. Abrams does. He's a good filmmaker. He's a good producer.
Yeah, he's a talented guy.
Yeah, but he's just going to that well too many times of these pre-existing IPs. It's like he's wearing out his welcome where you're almost sick of seeing him now. Mm-hmm. Because it's repeated. Every project you hear from J.J. Abrams, it's another pre-existing IP. He won't do anything original. Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I
want
to see something original from him, even though I probably liked more of their stuff than I disliked. But come on, you just keep going back to that well of things that have already existed before,
Mm-hmm. And there's potential for this. Another thing is that if J.J. Abrams is going to be producing, he's not going to be directing all of the episodes, right? I feel like if you're going to really do an Overlook series, if you're going to be just exploring the mythology, you should probably have a roster of horror filmmakers on there to do different episodes and to explore it. So I feel like I feel still like Mike Flanagan can still do an episode, though he's not, I guess, part of it in that way. I feel like it'd be more interesting to hand this off to a bunch of different directors and to just have J.J. Abrams in charge of it all. He doesn't really strike me as a horror guy. So on to more interesting news. The sequel to the Netflix original movie, The Babysitter, is dropping September 10th, so it's less than a month away. The film's going to continue the story of Cole Johnson, who, in attempting to forget the horrors of his past while coping with his transition to high school, is dealt with another tragic blow, this time in the form of old enemies who suddenly return to enact vengeance, forcing Cole to flip the script to ensure that his future survival is guaranteed. I'm looking forward to this. I believe Mick G is still the director on this. We're not going to have the same set of people, the same set of villains. It looks like it's a completely new cast of characters, so that bums me out a little bit. But I guess that makes sense that there's something larger tied to the Babysitter universe than just that small little section of the cult.
Isn't Bella Thorne coming back?
I think Bella Thorne's coming back. The fact that Bella Thorne is coming back, but the fact that Samara Weaving isn't coming back is kind of disappointing to me.
Yeah,
because she was what made that movie for me anyway.
Yeah, I really liked The Babysitter. I mean, the whole thing, even outside of Samara Weaving, but she was the main draw of it, and she was the main part of the charm of the movie. So
I thought they were going to build the franchise around her.
Yeah.
That's what is kind of surprising about this. So
Yeah.
I guess what we're going to see with this, and this is just me guessing, is that it's going to be an attempt to give the mythology a much larger universe instead of it being tied to just one small subset of a cult. So I guess we're going to get a whole maybe there's probably a whole universe of babysitters out there who go out and do what we saw in the first one. And what we saw in the first one was just one example of many.
I kind of trust McG on this one.
Mm-hmm.
I like what he done with The Babysitter. I like his sense of humor. I like his filmmaking style. And I noticed he is a big part of Supernatural, which I'm in the third season of now, and I'm loving Supernatural. So I just want to see what McG does next, even though I'm disappointed that Samara Weaving isn't in it. So next one, I'm really excited about this one. The makers of Mixtape Massacre, which if you listen to the podcast, you know we love that game. So they're going to do a really cool thing. It's a virtual game night in September, Mixtape Madness. It'll be broadcast from the Mixtape Massacre's YouTube page, and there'll be a video that will run in the background while you play the board game with occasional interruptions that will affect your gameplay and live action scenes filmed for the event to add to the experience. And the makers of the game say, the fun doesn't stop there, as prizes and giveaways will be given out during the night that players can enter via the Mixtape Massacre social channels. The event is September 26th, and it starts at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And all you need is your Mixtape Massacre board game. So that should be pretty fun.
I found this next bit of news interesting. Apparently, they're going to be releasing an official 3-issue comic book series based on Terrifier and Art the Clown. This is supposed to hold us over until we get Terrifier 2. The quantity and price is to be determined, but they're going to be signed and limited. The first issue is going to be released in October. I'm guessing they're just going to try to expand the mythology. And, you know, we've already seen a lot of horror comics or a lot of horror franchises injected into the comic book world. There was an Evil Dead, like an Ash comic book series. We've seen Freddy and Jason as far as in a comic book series. So, in fact, I mean, a lot of horror's roots in America is in comic books when you think of The Vault of Horror and Tales from the Crypt and all those classic EC comics. So it seems like an interesting idea. Something to hold over the fans, because we normally would be getting Terrifier 2 at the end of the year, but as we mentioned when we had our podcast with Art the Clown himself, David Howard Thornton, COVID put the production on hold, so they still have a week left of filmmaking. So even though Damon Leone is really hard at work and he's going to have most of it edited together, they can't release it until they can get that last week of filming going.
Well, I think this is a perfect idea to expand the mythos, you know, because I know they're going to have a little more of Art's background in part 2, but we don't want to see all of it in the movies, you know. So it's good that they expand on it in comic form, so we don't have to see that, you know, muddying up the story in the movies, so we can see more slashing and killing and Art being creepy instead of trying to over-explain things, you know. So
the artist will be Steve McGuinness.
And I'm also excited for Eli Roth's History of Horror. It picked up for a second season on AMC. This is what Eli Roth says. I'm so thrilled to be continuing this historic series with AMC. In season 1, we had the most incredible conversations with the top creators in the field who really helped fans around the world appreciate the horror genre in a new light. We look forward to going even deeper in season 2, bringing out the A-listers to share their stories with everyone for all time, and adding more and more films to the canon. AMC is the perfect network to partner with on a passion project like this, and we can't wait to get started. So season 2 debuts October 10th on AMC, and all 7 episodes of season 1 are available on Blu-ray October 6th.
I'm pretty excited for this. I mean, I loved Eli Roth's The History of Horror, and I thought it was very extensive and it covered a lot. But horror is such a wide-ranging genre that as expansive as that series was, it still wasn't enough to cover everything. And I think one of the things that disappointed me the most about that series is that it only delved into American horror. And if you think about all the Italian horror, like giallo films, if you think about all the Asian horror stuff out of South Korea, comes out of Japan, Takashi Miike, there's a whole world out there that was skipped over. And it also didn't, I don't think it really delved very deeply into like exploitation movies either. Had a lot of slashers, which I mean, a lot of slashers are exploitation movies, but they didn't have a dive into exploitation movies. I get why now it wasn't as expansive. It is something that you would need to be a multiple season thing for it to truly work. So I'm guessing they probably had this in the works all along.
It could have been better. I'm hoping it'll be better once it's extended into a second season, because like you said, like the first season, they went through a different subgenre with each episode. They explored a lot of things in depth, and other things they just skipped over or just breezed past it. You know what I mean? Because you can't really dive deep into like a Ken Burns type of documentary because it's on AMC. I think if it would have been done straight for Shudder, it would be much more comprehensive and much more detailed in their exploration of these things. But it's such a wide scope that they're trying to tackle that they're just, I think they're concentrating on getting new horror fans involved in the world of horror.
Oh, one last thing before I forget, I wanted to mention. We didn't mention it in the news things. Nev Campbell is confirmed for Scream 5. All right. So the theme of today's episode is mindfuck movies. We are going to be quarantine mindfuck movies, kind of, actually.
Yeah. And modern mindfuck movies too. Two of them are from this year, and then the other one is from a few years ago, like 10 years ago. And they had a fascinating parallels that run through all three movies that I really wanted to explore. So I'm really excited about discussing these.
All right. So what's the first one on our menu, Michael?
Our first one's from 2019, but I'll have to check it out when the release was. I think it's going to be going to count as a 2020 horror film. It was VIVARIUM.
2020. It was released in 2020.
And this one's VIVARIUM, directed and co-written by Lorgan Finnegan, and it stars Imogen Poots and Jesse Eisenberg. It's about a young couple who are looking for a new home and get trapped in a strange neighborhood made up of a labyrinth of identical houses. I really enjoyed this one right from the beginning. It has a strange realtor that takes them. Yeah, Martin, that takes them to this house, and he's strange, but he's not run away and get the fuck out of here strange. He's just strange enough to make you think, what the hell is going on here? And then things turn out stranger than you even imagine they're going to.
Yeah. I like this one quite a bit. I don't think it's a perfect movie, and some of the ideas could have been explored to a deeper extent. But I think it creates a really convincing world that it managed to creep me out in a way that I guess is not typical of horror. Like the settings of the movie don't feel like a horror film, but there's since it takes place in a neighborhood called Yonder, and in this neighborhood every house looks exactly the same. They're the exact same green pastel color. Every block looks the same. The sky is a perfect blue. Clouds are perfectly shaped like clouds, like drawings of clouds, not like actual clouds. It almost looks like a nightmarish Norman Rockwell painting that they're living in, and they get stuck in this really weird suburban nightmare, and everything about it is fake. It's artificial. It's plastic. There's a certain sort of silence that you don't really hear in normal neighborhoods. It gives the film a very alien and otherworldly quality, the world that they constructed for this movie, because I've never seen anything that looks like that before.
Yeah, and I like the setup of this movie. You know how they're with the realtor. He kind of gets progressively a little bit weirder and weirder. And just when things get really weird, the realtor ducks out. And then you start this thing, Jesse Eisenberg panics and starts smoking all the time. And there's just jumbled editing that makes it kind of maddening as it goes along. And then they do the thing where they try to walk toward the sun and they kind of circle back to the house. And then all the stuff like boxes of food left for them and all that. And then At this point, I started thinking, all right, how is this going to go beyond an extended Twilight Zone or Black Mirror episode? And then, bam, the baby is in a box. A baby is delivered to them, and that's what takes it beyond an extended Twilight Zone episode for me. And that's when things get even stranger and a little scary.
See, the fact that there's a baby thrown in, that the couple actually gets a baby delivered to them that they're asked to raise, and it's obviously not a human baby. That reminds me of a film from this year that we also reviewed on the podcast. I forgot what it was called. As it was, I wasn't a big fan of that other movie, but I think it was called something Room. It's about a room that gives you whatever you wish. Let me see if I could find it right here. Room.
Yeah, Room, yeah.
Yeah, it reminded me of Room. And Room kind of took the same idea of a baby that is obviously not human, that was given to you by some strange alien force where you have to raise it, and it kind of has like an accelerated way to grow up. But this movie explores that idea so much better than Room did. Everything that Room did wrong with that premise, Vivarium does right with that premise. And it starts with the kid. And I know we praise a lot of child actors just because child acting is impressive, just because you're asking children to draw upon emotions that they don't really have or they don't really possess. So we've talked about some good child actors on here, some ones that are really creepy in movies like The Hole in the Ground or Z or something like that. This one might take the cake. The actor that they picked for this movie does something unique because he's not creepy in a way that asks you to draw on regular human emotions. He's creepy in a way that seems alien. He projects an unhuman quality in the way that he speaks, the way that he screams, the way that he behaves. The kid gave me genuine anxiety, and I never get that from kids in the movie, but I understood Jesse Eisenberg's character despising that little kid and wanting to kill him because he's obviously not a human being, and his behavior is so bizarre. And that voice that he has really gets under my skin. It's so unnatural, his speech patterns.
It's not even really his voice, so you really don't know what or who the kid is because he's mimicking other people.
Mm-hmm.
And then you come to find out, I won't give too much away, but you come to find out he's mimicking other people who had been in that house.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, and the whole thing with him growing rapidly,
mm-hmm.
and it seems like each stage as he grows, he gets creepier and creepier.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny to see the way, it's funny to see the way they react to the kid, because they're all flipping him off and saying "fuck you," and then, like you said, Jesse Eisenberg starts wanting to kill the kid, but then Imogen Poots' motherly instinct kind of kicks in, and then you see kind of another layer to the story and a bit of social commentary, you know?
Yeah. I read a couple things after. Some people say that this movie is an allegory for capitalism and what's expected of people. You move into a neighborhood that's perfect. You live there. Your job is to raise a child. And I think there's a part where Imogen Poots asks, "What is my purpose in life?" And he says, "Your purpose is to like bear children, raise a child, and then die." And she's kind of discarded early on, even before. So I'm not sure if that's actually a correct reading of the movie, but I think it's an interesting one, and I think there might be some validity to it.
And it's also a commentary about how differently men and women
mm-hmm.
handle these situations, or the mom and the dad.
Mm-hmm.
Where Imogen cares for the kid by instinct, even though he's strange and even though he gets progressively stranger and more dangerous. And then Jesse Eisenberg just wants to dig a hole. He needs a solution. He needs answers.
Mm-hmm. But I also think it's interesting what he's digging a hole for is something they don't even realize they're digging it for. He thinks he's digging it for answers, but he's actually digging something completely different. And I don't want to ruin it, but I think that also applies to the capitalism metaphor that might be going on in this movie. The reason that he spends his life digging for what? So you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, because what he digs up,
mm-hmm.
and what what that ends up being. It's not what you think it is at first.
Hmm. Also,
It's-
the fact that she has a motherly instinct ends up working against her, because part of that is because she feels like she's supposed to take care of, because she's supposed to do the right thing. And I think by the end of the movie, she ends up kind of regretting giving into her motherly instinct for that creature.
Yeah, and she goes too long. You know, she relies on her instinct too long,
Hmm.
and it turns into like the kid, as it grows, it slowly asserts dominance.
Hmm.
So by the time she realizes that she should have let Jesse Eisenberg kill the kid, it's too late. This kid is already dominating their lives. You know.
I thought it was some really good acting by both Imogen Poots and Jesse Eisenberg. I think there's a lot of layers to each performance that they give. I think you feel their sense of desperation, you feel their isolation, and a lot of their despair of what it would be like to be stuck in a nightmarish scenario that doesn't make any logical sense, but you can't escape from. And I also like the little moments where they start to appreciate old things about their life, like when they're finally able to listen to some music and they start dancing around. It also this could also be that capitalism metaphor, because a lot of people, and I'm not trying to take political sides on this, I'm just saying what I think the content that's inherent in the picture. A lot of people will criticize capitalism. They say that it robs your life of purpose, because all you do is you work just to get food on the table and to keep yourself afloat, and you die. And it seems like that's what they're doing while they're stuck in this world, that they forget to appreciate the little things in life, like dancing, laughing, just holding each other in their arms just for 1 minute. So there's a lot of different emotions they play on. It also reminds you, appreciate your own life a little bit. Don't take the time really quick to stop and smell the roses, appreciate what you have, dance with your loved ones, hold each other tight, and make the best of what you can of this life.
Yeah, and movies like this, you know, I was excited to discuss these movies, but it's also very difficult to discuss them too, because if you want to discuss what's great about these movies, you have to give spoilers and you have to give the movie away, and it's hard to discuss it without that.
I think we've given mild spoilers, but I don't think we've really revealed what it was. And I think we did a good job of dancing around the hole that he's digging.
Yeah, like
just pay attention to the hole that he's digging. That's all I'm going to say.
What ends up being in the hole, and then what happens between the couple, and then the kid showing up with a box of his own, and then what's in that box.
Oh, that scene is disturbing. But then again, I don't want to ruin it, but some of the terror on Imogen Poots' face when she gets handed the box from that wicked child that grew up, when she gets handed the box and sees what's in it, that horrified look on her face really got to me.
Yeah. And I love both of their performances, but hers especially. Mm-hmm. I think she really dominated that movie, because she was forced to.
I think she's the main character.
Yeah, and there's a wider range of emotions where he goes into like zombie mode. Like it gets too much for him. It shows that I think women can handle a little more physically and emotionally than we can as men. So he tries to assert his strength and dominance, but when he's rendered helpless, he just digs a hole. And he doesn't know where he's going with that hole. He just hopes he gets to something, you know. So he's taken out of the equation as a character. He almost goes numb, where she experiences this wide range of emotions through the whole experience.
Yeah.
And okay, my takeaway from this is: are we in an endless pattern where parents sacrifice themselves, whether intentionally or unintentionally, for their kids, so they can go out into the world and feed this loop of capitalism?
I think
did you get that feeling?
Yeah, I think that's part of the message that the movie's trying to get across. And as for our viewers, if you're considering checking this out, you got to keep in mind that this is a movie that operates on a metaphor, somewhat like The Platform does. But I actually think this does it a little more successfully than The Platform did, in my opinion anyway. I think it did a better job of exploring um, a metaphor as a physical reality.
Yeah, and there's a lot of great things going on here, and overall, I ended up liking it a lot, but I didn't love it. It's overall strange.
Same thing.
Yeah.
I liked it a lot, but I don't think it's perfect. I think that some of the ideas could have been explored to a deeper extent. I think a lot of what we're discussing right now, as far as the themes of the film, they are in the movie, but I feel like you have to dig a little deeper. It's not apparent just by watching it that that's where the themes were. I had to do a little bit research myself, and then when it was done, I was like, oh yeah, I could definitely see that's in there. I think they could have done possibly a better job of communicating some of the ideas that they're trying to communicate. It feels a little bit incomplete at times. I don't know how to describe it. It's so far from a perfect film. It doesn't do everything right, but it does enough right, and what it does right, it does so well that it's easy to kind of overlook some of the shortcomings of the movie for me.
Yeah, well, it's for me, it was overall strange and compelling, and
Mhm.
yeah, the kid did elevate it above an extended Twilight Zone or Black Mirror episode, but not much.
Yeah.
It was great performances, but it was just nonstop strangeness. It never grounded itself enough for me. I think it could have helped to ground it a little more as far as character development, because at one point the character development almost came to a halt.
Hmm.
And then, was that intentional?
I think it might have been intentional, because if you're stuck in a loop doing the same thing over and over, there's no room for growth as a person. So that could have been part of the point of the movie.
Yeah, it kind of told me that we lose our humanity to society, basically, to the never-ending loop of societies and societal expectations of what the American dream is.
Yeah. So a lot of metaphors going on. So if you're one of those people who don't like movies like that, if you don't like movies operating as metaphors, or you find that pretentious, or it's not your thing, this is not going to be for you. I don't think this movie is for most people, actually. To be honest, I don't think most people would like Vivarium. But if you're an adventurous film goer and you want to see something interesting, something original, something different, if you want your sci-fi horror to be a little bit more challenging, then I guess this is for you. Because another thing that I found interesting about this is a science fiction horror movie. It has nothing to do with aliens, and it doesn't draw upon most of the tropes that you expect from sci-fi horror. As in great movies like Event Horizon and Alien, as different as those are, they rely on certain tropes from the horror genre that makes them more familiar. This one is a sci-fi horror that seems to skip all the tropes that you're used to seeing in sci-fi horror movies.
Yeah, if for nothing else, I recommend it just for a decent mindfuck movie, and another excellent performance from Imogen Poots. She can do no wrong as far as I'm concerned. She seems to get better and better with each film she's in.
Yeah, and a very well made movie too.
Yeah,
Where even though I don't think the ideas are explored as fully as they could, the movie does a good job of creating a believable, tangible universe that feels like it exists outside of our reality.
yeah. So that one was good, but one that I liked even more than that one was You Should Have Left, starring Kevin Bacon. Is written and directed by David Koepp, who did Stir of Echoes. It's based on the novel by Daniel Kellman, and it stars Kevin Bacon, Amanda Seyfried. And speaking of excellent child performances on that last one, I think this one was even better. Avery 2 Essex, that little girl could act her ass off, dude. Wow, what a range of emotion in that little girl. I couldn't even tell, how does a girl that small even tap into those kind of emotions?
I don't know. It's weird. Kevin Bacon, I think, gives an excellent performance where he works a lot to give it layers, but I don't think it's as good as he is. I don't think it's as effective as the child actress is in this movie. And I wasn't going to compare it to the one in the last movie, only because a lot of the times when we talk about like good child actors, we're talking about child actors in creepy roles, or playing monsters, or playing villains. This is a child actress being an actual child, being a believable child. And she's so sweet, she's so loving, she's so caring, that it almost breaks your heart how sweet she is.
Yeah. Well, the synopsis on this one is Kevin Bacon plays a former banker, and him and his beautiful younger wife, played by Amanda Seyfried, book a vacation at an isolated modern home in the Welsh countryside and realize they've been led into a strange trap. And there's so much mystery in it, so much character development that was missing in the last one we discussed. And it's ambiguous, but the story unfolds so effortlessly and organically. It just seems like it hits every beat just like it wanted to. And it made me feel every emotion that it set out to make me feel.
Okay, so here's my thing, and you're probably not going to like this. There's some things that I like about this movie, but overall, I didn't enjoy it, and I thought it was kind of padded out for a while. Kevin Bacon does a really good job with his performance, but after a while, I stopped actually caring about his character. If it wasn't for the daughter, I would have had a hard time caring about his scenario and what was going on. Some of what was going on might have been just because I'd seen already 2 mindfuck movies before, because the third one we're going to discuss I actually watched before this one. It started to lose my interest at the halfway point and only grabbed it back in fits and starts. I think there's some good atmosphere going on, but the script isn't well developed enough for me. I had a hard time caring about Kevin Bacon's character or the redemption that he goes through. Amanda Seyfried is good, but I feel like they could have utilized her more and took more advantage of her. It's mostly the little girl that is what kept me in this movie. I didn't particularly care for You Should Have Left.
And this is a pretty rare occurrence, but I completely disagree. We usually see eye to eye for the most part on the movies that we discuss. But as much as you disliked it or as much as it lost you, it had me in the grips of its charm the entire time. It's right from when it opens with the little girl's dream. It's strange, creepy, and you see the creative shots that shows you're in for a cool ride. And
the first 40 minutes had me in the whole way, just to let you know. It was only like at the halfway point that it started to get wobbly to me and going in fits and starts. So it didn't have a problem drawing me in. It had a problem, I guess, keeping me interested after a while, where I didn't particularly like Kevin Bacon's character, and I think I think that's part of the point, though. I don't think he's supposed to be a likable person, and I think Kevin Bacon does a good job of drawing that. But it left not enough for me to grasp at it. It's well directed. There's good performances in it, but there's something about it that felt kind of empty to me after a while.
Well, the reason why I was 100% invested in the story is because I love the dynamic between Kevin Bacon and Amanda Seyfried, where she's an actress and you can see that he has some jealousy that he's trying to get over. But he's not a dick about it. It's like seething within him, but he's not letting it manifest itself. And then you see why later as the story unfolds. And another thing that I love is a very rare communication with the daughter, explaining tough situations throughout the whole movie. It's that they have these fascinating and compelling family discussions. And I've noticed every time that there's a prominent kid character in a movie like this, there comes a certain point in the narrative where the kid as a character kind of drops off and it becomes a victim that needs to be saved by the parents. I didn't feel that in this one. I felt this was a very real little girl, a very real scared little daughter, and they stopped to explain things to her along the way in a realistic way. And it kept me invested in it the whole time.
You know what scene actually really moved me in this movie? The most effective part is, like I said, I'm not going to give away, but Kevin Bacon's character has a past in this movie, and he's not a very well-liked person. And the movie will eventually reveal the reasons he's not well-liked. And when his daughter finds out about what he did or the reason people don't like him, it's a situation or a scenario that would turn a lot of children against you. But there's a moment where she knows what her father has been through and what he might have possibly done while they're sitting at the dinner table, and she expresses her love for him because he looks very disappointed with himself that his daughter is aware of something he's not very proud of. And she just reaches over and touches his hand without really looking up at him. I thought that was very sweet. I thought it was very human emotion. and it's one of those tiny moments that you don't really see done a lot in movies, like a real like sentiment without being sentimental, if you understand if you get what I mean. So the sentiment without being sentimental. The scene, she just reaches over and touches her dad's hand, and the look on Kevin Bacon's face and how she pulls it off is very moving, actually. And I think that little girl, her performance possesses a lot of sweet humanity in it.
Yeah, it felt very real.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing I loved about it is how it started out as if, because I didn't look too much into the premise because I wanted to go in fairly fresh.
Mm-hmm.
So I assumed for a while it was just another haunted house film, especially after seeing liking Stir of Echoes so much with Kevin Bacon with the same director.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the little girl starts asking, why does everyone hate Daddy? And we see hints of Kevin Bacon's past, and it unfolds so superbly. I think that's when it starts turning into something else.
Mm-hmm.
And then another thing, little details like that strange little store in town where the owner knows something but won't tell, and he only hints at what's going on. I thought that was a great touch to the story and a great touch to the strangeness of it.
Yeah.
And then when the guy at the store starts asking, you never saw Stetler? He saw you. And it gives this ominous kind of, he's like the ominous warning old man, but he's also strange and kind of part of it, you know?
And isn't it weird how this parallels with the last movie we discussed?
Yeah.
And I kind of want to delve into more, but I don't want to spoil these movies because I feel like people should watch them fresh. But if you watch these movies back to back, you're going to get a sense of deja vu. And this is not necessarily a bad thing because both of these movies explore similar concepts of repetition and being stuck in a place that exists in our reality, that exists in our physical reality, but also seem to exist on another plane of reality. Yet I don't get the feeling that each filmmaker, these were made around the same time, and neither filmmaker was aware of the other one. So you don't get the feeling that one is ripping the other off. I just find it very fascinating that two filmmakers could come away and come with, as different as the movies are, have some core ideas that are so similar that it's pretty striking. But you know that they don't, that they're they come from their makers. They're not copying each other.
Yeah. And I think the movie addresses what you said, where Kevin Bacon is kind of an unlikable character. I think it addresses that in another detail that's added, the meditation tape.
Yeah.
It feels compelling, but ultimately futile with each session. So each session, each time he tries to go listen to this meditation tape to kind of put things into perspective, everything around him is getting stranger and stranger. And then that's when he finds the notes that are left for him saying, leave, you should leave now, go now. And then the house gets progressively stranger and bigger and more sinister and more like a labyrinth. So the house is another character to me.
It's an interesting location too.
Yeah, it almost has a life of its own. And then he finds a secret staircase, and then as it goes through, it has some jump scares, but I think they're very strategic and effective. It's not heavy on jump scares, but they come just the right time. You're kind of lulled into this. It's almost hypnotic. For me, it was almost hypnotic the way it gets you into the story and into the characters, because I cared about all of them so much. And then you're kind of lulled into this false sense of I don't know what I'm trying to say. But you're kind of lulled. I was kind of it kind of relaxed me in a way just before these jump scares came up. So I thought they were very well crafted. And then the person, someone's taking pictures of them throughout, and you're like, who the hell is this?
See, that reminded me a little bit of Lost Highway.
Yeah.
But I think Lost Highway creeped me out more with that same concept. It's weird because I recognize a lot of the things that you like about this movie and why some people would appreciate it, and I get it. And I don't even think there's anything particularly bad about it. The story just felt hollow to me, and the jump scares didn't particularly work for me. Like, none of them actually really surprised me. I didn't move or jump during any of the actual jump scares. And I hate to admit this, but lately I feel like I've been more susceptible to jump scares than normal. Maybe it's being in quarantine for so long that I get jumpy. But the movie didn't. I don't know. It didn't make me jump. There was something about it that just after 40 minutes, it started to lose me. And the redemption, I don't know. It didn't work for me. A lot of talent that went into this movie, and I think that this is a great production design. I think the house, the location was great. I think there's good cinematography. I even think there's some interesting editing tricks to make the house look like it's a moving entity. Like when there's that portrait of the house inside of the house. When every time the camera starts zooming in on it very slowly, it gives you an ominous feeling, and then it jumps in even faster with the editing tricks. And there's a couple of parts where you get the feeling that time may be repeating itself a little bit, but you're not sure, when there's a slight weird editing skip. And I at first thought it was an issue with my television. Then I realized that, no, that's actually the movie. It's actually doing that. And that actually is something that the movie we're going to talk about next also kind of explored and did.
Well, I love how for me, it had a lot of things that I love in it. A lot of subtleties, a lot of emotion put in, a lot of character development. And then it leads up to these big scenes like the Kevin Bacon's dream sequence, where he realizes he's dreaming and he keeps screaming himself, wake up, and he cuts himself, he cuts his wrist, and then there's a really gory part where he jams glass into his neck. I thought that was a really cool part. And then I like how the reason I was able to feel so compelled by this and so interested in it the entire time is it starts out a very good dynamic between Kevin Bacon and Amanda Seyfried. And then as the relationship erodes, the stranger the story gets. Mm-hmm. And that's what kept me invested in the story the whole time. And then the house expanding and doors in weird places. And then we get more answers than we ever thought we would. Because I thought it was going to continue to be strange and kind of not explain itself like Vivarium, but it ends up explaining more than I thought it would in the end.
Yeah. Kind of robbed it of its mystery for me a little bit. I mean, I don't know. I could have done without some of the explanation, only because it makes the place seem less mysterious, and I think a lot of that kind of lost me. The fact that they explain so much about the house and you know exactly what it is and you know exactly what its purpose is, it didn't click with me.
For me, it unfolded so naturally and so organically that it didn't feel like I was being told too much.
Well,
and then like you said, with the shifting of time, and we find out who the man in the house is, and who wrote the notes you should have left. It ends up being a parallel to the next movie we discussed. That's another parallel. So, and then another one where the sins of the father come down on the children, and they address that very directly. But
are you saying? Yeah, go on.
And just like the other one, I think the ending involves sacrifice and how parents' lives affects their children, and how it goes back into the loop at the end, just like Vivarium.
Yeah,
there's a lot of strange little parallels.
And I think the next movie has even more parallels with You Should Have Left than even Vivarium does. They all deal with patterns, they all deal with repetition, but the next movie is also about a physical place that seems to exist on another plane where time doesn't pass the way that it does in the real world. And this movie is called Triangle. I'll be honest, I thought this was from 2020. When you told me to check this out and watch it, I thought we were discussing all 2020 movies. But found out this was from 2009. I don't know how this one skipped past me. I like this one quite a bit, particularly for Melissa George.
Yeah, this one loved it. I think I watched it in 2011, like a couple of years after it came out. And I became so obsessed with this director. He also did Severance.
Mm-hmm.
He did Severance, Black Death, and Creep, were 3 other horror films really good by this guy. And this director Christopher Smith, he wrote it and directed it. I love when directors with a vision like this write and direct their own films. But he just finished a movie called The Vanishing, about the most haunted house in England, where a young reverend, his wife and daughter move in a big house that has horrifying secrets. So not only does this have parallels to Vivarium and You Should Have Left, the next movie that he just completed has striking similarities to You Should Have Left. I thought it was kind of funny.
I like this one a lot. I liked Melissa George in this movie. Another interesting I found was another thing is that Liam Hemsworth is in this movie.
Yeah.
And he's actually a producer on the movie, so he must have really dug the script or something. If he wanted to sign on as producer, must have been excited. This was before his brother Chris Hemsworth did the Thor film in 2011. Chris Hemsworth became big before Liam Hemsworth. I didn't realize he'd been around that long, or that even back in 2009 he had enough pull to be producing a movie. That kind of surprised me when I found out that it was actually from 2009 and not 2020.
Yeah. And actually, in this one, like you said, Melissa George's performance is phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Her character just seems to jump off the screen, and you can feel her authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
And the strangeness about her, and there's kind of you can tell right from the beginning, right from the first frame, that she has a crazy past. Like something traumatizing has happened to her, and you don't find out till the very end. And so the actual, we haven't mentioned the premise of the movie yet. It's about a young mother played by Melissa George with an autistic son and she goes sailing with friends and gets stuck in a murderous time loop after finding an abandoned ocean liner. And to me, right away, it's interesting. It compels you, it pulls you in right away. I love the wide aspect ratio that makes it more cinematic. And it, like the last one, it begins with a dream, and you see it's a person having a dream of what's to come.
Mm-hmm.
And then you know it's going to come back later in the movie. And then right away, something's already wrong. And she doesn't seem to know where her son is. And then it's kind of an interesting dynamic between the friends when she goes sailing with them. And I thought it was just enough character development to show who these people were before they're thrown into this strangeness. And it gets progressively stranger and stranger.
Here's another thing about the movie is that it does something really smart at the beginning that makes the rest of the film more engaging. Otherwise, there are parts of the movie where it could be, I guess, seen as slightly repetitious, but there's an element that's thrown in at the beginning that keeps it from going that route. Is you see her taking care of her son, kind of telling him something about the horrible things that you see are not real and they're a dream. And then she just cuts to a scene where she's just showing up to go on that trip. And when they ask her about her son, she seems despondent. Oh, he's at school. She barely seems to even answer. And he says it in such a way when she's talking about her son that you have to wonder, is he really at school? Is that where he's really at? Because every time you answer that question, you look very confused and in doubt as to what you're saying or why you're saying. So you're like, so is the kid at school or not? Because the way that she plays it doesn't seem believable. And the whole time she's trying to get back to her kid, and you're left with the mystery is like, well, where is her kid? Because for some reason her story about him being at school isn't believable. And when the movie answers that question, it's, I think, a very satisfying answer, and it makes you kind of go back and re-examine everything that you saw from the beginning, where I kind of want to watch it again because I think I might pick up on a few more things that I didn't see the first time. Things that you would not be able to pick up on until you know the full scheme of the story, until you see everything played out. You'd have to go back and watch it again to catch all of those things that the movie's laying out. And I also liked it because it answers a question but the question that it answers only opens up more questions. So yeah, it's satisfying, but there's a whole universe that makes you think that there's a whole universe out there, because once you get the answer as to what happened to her kid and what happened before she got on that boat, you wonder how real some of her emotions and the shock of her being on that boat actually are. Is she stuck in a time warp? Is she know what's going to happen but unable to change it? Do you understand what I mean? Because when she's on the boat, she seems shocked by the scenario. But technically, by the end of the movie, when you go back, she shouldn't be shocked by the scenario, yet she seems genuinely shocked. Kind of reminds me of Watchmen, where Dr. Manhattan can perceive the past, the future, and the present, but he's incapable of changing it. And even if he knows what's going to happen, he still acts shocked about it. So there's a lot of questions about a time warp that's going on in this movie that I found fascinating.
Well, it seems like her character is in a constant state of confusion.
Yeah.
And just when she thinks she has things figured out, she becomes confused again. And I think it confuses the viewer too. But it confuses you in a way that compels you and draws you in, and doesn't confuse you in a way that pisses you off.
Yeah,
it confuses you just enough to know that this answer has got to be coming up later. Like even the little details, like when she first walks onto the dock, and that young guy is walking ahead of her, and he acts almost towards her and talking as if she said something really crazy. But then you don't know what she said. You don't know why this guy's acting like this towards her. And even that comes around.
Yeah,
you know,
and it makes sense why he was acting like it. You think that certain people are kind of just being rude, but then you realize there's a reason that they find something off about this character.
You really have to pay attention, because this and so many things that going all the way back from that kid on the dock that was acting strange about her. There's so many things repeat later in the story, and from a different perspective.
Yeah.
So everything that confuses you throughout, you know that later once you start seeing the parallels and start seeing that things are repeating themselves in a different perspective, you know you're going to get answers. And like you said, every answer it offers you is satisfying.
It's satisfying, but it opens everything up to more questions. So even though you're satisfied, it does something where you're satisfied, but it's ambiguous at the same time, because even though your questions are answered, okay, that makes sense. But then why is this the way it is? So I think it's one of those movies that kind of, like the scenarios in the movie, the logic loops back on itself and makes you reconsider multiple possibilities of what could be happening in this universe. Is this a Groundhog Day scenario? Does it have to be done right before people can break the loop? Or Shane, does she know that what she's doing when she goes back? Is her memory wiped when she goes back? It's very interesting. Also reminded me a little bit of Rick and Morty. I'm not going to say why, because I think that would ruin it. But they did something similar on Rick and Morty where they see themselves and they crash into a different universe. I kind of feel that Melissa George should have been in more projects. I know that she's a fairly active actress, but I think that she's more talented than she's more talented than the film roles that she's got. I feel like I'm surprised that she hasn't gotten more film roles or more stuff within the horror genre, actually.
Well, between this and 30 Days a Night, she's a very understated scream queen as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Oh, and what did you think about Room 237?
Oh, obvious Shining.
Not to The Shining.
I have a feeling all three of these movies are somewhat influenced by The Shining. They're not like The Shining, but I could definitely see each one took elements from The Shining and incorporated into their own universe.
Yeah, and much like You Should Have Left, when you go in Room 237, there's that go to the theater message written on the mirror. And then the same as a character receiving messages from an ominous source in You Should Have Left, and they both end up being the same type of
scenario,
the same type of answer of who it is. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And
so
then when they find that blood and they follow the blood trail, and then you later see whose blood that is, and then it's kind of jarring in the story. Like, you're following Melissa George around, you're very invested in the mystery, and you're invested in how it's unfolding and what she's trying to find out. And all of a sudden the other characters start attacking her.
Mm-hmm.
You have no fucking idea why, and then you see later from a different perspective why.
Yeah.
And then this hooded figure shows up and starts shooting everybody. And it's, who the fuck is this hooded figure? And then you see who they are. It's all the pacing, the editing, the story development is all seamless to me. It all seems
and it's
like
also a short movie too. That's another thing about this. It packs a lot of its concepts and ideas into a very compact running time. So there isn't really there's no chance for the movie to have any lulls or downtime or anything like that. So the once it gets weird, it never lets up and it never slows down and it never gives you a breather, which I guess could be a bad thing, but the movie seems to end at the right time, that it never ends up getting exhausting because the movie isn't long for that to happen.
And if you notice, they did another thing on here that was the same as You Should Have Left. When they start skipping frames, like you said.
Yep.
Where you said you felt it was almost a glitch in your TV. The same thing happens in this one. They're skipping frames, and then we start seeing the events that already happened from a different angle. Every bit of strangeness makes sense. It all comes back around and explains itself in a satisfying way, but doesn't over-explain it. It doesn't hold your hand, basically.
So all of these movies are actually no. 2 of them are on Prime. Vivarium is available for free on Amazon Prime in the US. I can't speak to other territories. And so is Triangle. You Should Have Left is, even though Vivarium is a fairly new movie, it came about a couple months ago, You Should Have Left is brand new. So if you want to see that, you have to rent it either through video on demand or through Amazon Prime. You can rent it either way. Or Redbox.
Redbox, yeah.
Redbox is the other option too.
At Redbox, it's only available on DVD, so it's like $1.50 and you watch a great movie.
Well, it was actually meant to be a theatrical release for Universal Studios, but because of the pandemic, they just decided to release it just to make it a direct-to-video release.
Okay.
But it is designed to be a theatrical motion picture.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I have one more thing to say about Triangle. All those parts I mentioned where it kind of turns the movie into something else, where at one point it gets a little stranger, and then at one time the strangeness multiplies, and then the brutality multiplies, and then it gets to the climax. How the whole story culminates, and then we get major questions answered in those last few minutes, and the story takes an even darker turn.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so dark and so sad at the end, and the way everything plays out, it shows yet another thing from another perspective. Mm-hmm. You think that all the other perspective shots are done, and then you see yet one more thing from another perspective. That's what makes it a perfect mindfuck for me. And it leaves you feeling sad and strange, but exhilarated at the same time. Mm-hmm. Excited to what you just watched. And this is another movie that feels very personal to me.
Designed for repeat viewings, because a lot of the details you're not going to get until you actually understand the full scope of the story and what specifically is going on. There are certain details that you're not going to catch until you're fully aware of everything that's going on in the movie. It's one of the movies that, to me, that kind of demands at least two viewings to fully process every concept that it's exploring.
I love this director. This is probably one of the only directors that has actually 2 movies that feel very personal to me. And a lot of times when I mention Severance and Triangle, a lot of people have not seen those 2 movies. You really have to be a hardcore horror fan to know these 2 movies. And it's 2 movies that, just like Plague Town, that I show to everyone that comes over my house.
Yeah.
So it feels very personal to me. I love it.
This was our 3rd podcast without a guest, and to make up for it, we are going to be having a double interview for next week's podcast.
Mitch McLeod, who's the director of Silhouette, which is available on Prime, and then the director and the producer of Murder in the Woods, which should be in drive-in theaters already by the time you're listening or watching this podcast.
And what makes this pretty cool is that it's a slasher movie with an all-Latino cast, which is something that surprisingly we have not seen yet. We have not seen it yet, so I'm all for it. So next week we're going to hit you folks with 2 mini interviews. We hope you enjoy. So check out our Facebook page. Follow us on social media. It's facebook.com/Pickles Horror Show. And what is our Instagram page again?
Instagram at Pickles Horror Show.
Instagram at Pickles Horror Show. Till next week, folks. Happy horror.
Happy horror.